of the society or more pessimistic one?
It became more cynical over time with experience. I ended up filing a discrimination complaint against the Washington Post in March of 72. Myself and 6 other black reporters filed a discrimination complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in March of 1972 because I could see that we were stacked up on the city desk and we were not going anywhere. There was no provision for us to move off the city desk onto the foreign desk, the national desk, sports desk, and so on. And it was rigidly segregated. And it was given lip service. We were given lip service about integration. What alienated me and made me very cynical was the same lip service I had heard in '68 before I went into the Peace Corps. Right. When myself and another reporter named Jesse Lewis confronted the executive editor and the managing editor about the fact that there was no real upward mobility among the black reporters. Why was that? And he assured us that he'd be making changes and things would happen. So that was in the fall of '68. And I left that fall, end of September 1968, and came back in February 1971. Nothing had happened. There had been no changes. And that's when I began working with the other black reporters to organize, to confront management in a public way. Because the day we filed the complaint against the Washington Post as a discriminatory employer, we held a press conference and announced our filing of the complaint. It was the first type of complaint ever filed against a major newspaper in America. We announced our complaint at a 10 a.m. press conference, and then when the press conference was over, we went back to work. And it was broadcast on the evening news, at least in Washington, that evening, and it was covered by major newspapers and wire services. So then the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, did its own investigation, and they issued a report in November of 1972, branding the Post a discriminatory employer, and the Post began making changes. They refused to negotiate a settlement with us, but they began to make changes in the newsroom, significant changes. Blacks were being brought in to work on the national desk, foreign desk, in the sports department. I was shifted out to cover one of the major counties in area of subscription, Montgomery County, Maryland, which at that time, in '72, had the highest per capita income of any other county in the United States. So it was a plum assignment. And I did everything, and I enjoyed it. I covered everything, not just civil rights and crime, but everything that went on in daily life in a major suburban jurisdiction. And I went from that to living with guerrillas in Angola in '73. So I was having a ball. I was having a good time. I was surprised I wasn't fired. They didn't fire any of us. I was surprised that I thought
that would have just backfired for them, right?
They would have retaliated, because I asked my wife, I was still married, I asked my wife at the time, "You ready to go on welfare? Because I don't know after this whether I'm going to be employed." And she was doing a master's in public health nutrition at the University of Maryland in College Park. She said, "Well, I hope we don't have to go on welfare." I said, "I hope so too." But they didn't fire us.
This is interesting. So last year we talked to a professor in advertising, and we were talking about how the public perception of the Black community has evolved over time, and how it started as they were discouraged and you wouldn't see them in any advertisements or anything, and then slowly over time
in my youth,
right,
you didn't see any blacks in advertising. Yeah.
And now that you mentioned that these companies had to, because of the complaint that you filed, Washington Post, for example, had to change, and they started bringing more Black
Americans into the newsroom.
Exactly. So it all goes hand in hand.
Anchors is for broadcast.
Okay.
You don't have anchors in.
Right. Not in newsrooms. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I feel like it all goes hand in hand, where all these movements are even though they're happening in different parts of the country, but they're all coming together with I can see it. going?
Well, I saw it as a progression because the civil rights movement was really banging on the door for us to get in.
Right.
Then they hired some of us, and we were in. Now we had to change the institutions that we had been hired to work in, right? So the civil rights, I saw ourselves as an extension of the civil rights movement because until the 60s, the Washington Post had never hired, they had one black reporter, a guy named Simeon Booker in the mid-50s, and he had to use a segregated bathroom in the building. He couldn't use the bathroom everybody else used in the newsroom. So you can imagine what his life was like. And Washington, D.C. is a southern city. People don't recognize it as southern because it's the capital of the United States, but it's a very southern city. And so everything that was discriminatory throughout the South was in place in Washington, D.C. itself. Yeah. So I saw ourselves, when we filed our complaint in 72, as an extension of all the demonstrations and confrontations that took place beginning in 55 with the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott up until the assassination of King in 68.
Did your initiative with the other reporters start initiatives in other newspapers?
Yes. Well, one of the first things that happened is that the white women at the Washington Post organized right behind us in terms of patriarchy, being denied, treated as second-class citizens because they were women, based on gender. And then blacks and women at the New York Times also began to organize, all in reaction to ours. Now, those are the only definite lines that I knew that came out of our movement, were the women at the Washington Post organizing and making gains, and the blacks and the women at the New York Times organizing and confronting management. So those two developments came directly out of our confrontation with the Washington Post.
And if you guys didn't do that, how long? Who knows how long it would have taken?
Power doesn't yield to discussion, and I already knew that. Just from my coursework at Howard University, one of the things that in the course I took was how do you change societies? Do you go along and sort of acquiesce and keep quiet, or do you what brings the best result? Confrontation or going along? And always when you looked at the results, historically it was confrontation. So I knew that we had to confront the Washington Post. Having any more discussions with Ben Bradley, we're going nowhere. He'd give us what I say is a song and dance, and that would be it. Yeah. Till he put pressure on his newsroom managers, nothing